All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is Monday, December 30th, just a couple days away from the new year. This is your daily fix for your Texas Longhorns right here on All In Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson. That is Jake Jimerson. We hope you appreciated our weekend episode with us together in the same room, actually. To me, it felt like the episode almost ran a little bit more smooth. Conversation was a little bit more natural, habit-forming, I suppose. Not that we don't have those already. We do appreciate everybody as well keeping up with our new schedule, at least for this week. We will get back on our daily routine of first episode comes out Tuesday, we go through Friday, and then we have a Saturday immediate reaction following the game or whenever the immediate reaction game is. But with the holiday season and everything else kind of going on, and then Texas already naturally playing on New Year's Day on January 1st, which is on a Wednesday, we said, hey, let's just make Wednesday our Saturday, and we'll push everything else back and kind of adjust the schedule accordingly to that. And so we appreciate everybody kind of staying in tune and still kind of keeping on with us. And then, like I said, next week we'll get back on our regular scheduled programming. But anyway, today's episode, we have a fun one for you today. We are going to give you some injury updates on Texas Longhorns and on Arizona State in terms of their availability going into the quarterfinal game on Wednesday. And then some big bowl games in terms of Texas rivals happened over the weekend. And we will discuss the state of the programs of the Oklahoma Sooners and the Texas A&M Aggies, and things not looking particularly great in those two neck of the woods. But then also we will go through the quarterfinal games as well, going into this New Year's 6 games, I guess is what we call them. I don't know really what we call, I guess, quarterfinal games.
New Year's 8, I guess.
New Year's 8. Yeah, is that what it is now? Yeah, New Year's 8
teams. I think that'd be a good one.
I like that. I'm not against it by any means. And so, Jake, how are you doing, man? Safe travels back. I'm glad you got back home safe, but it was great to see you while you were in town in the great state of Texas for the holidays.
Yeah, it's great to get to go outside, see sunshine for a change. Enjoy some good weather.
Dude, it was like 80 today. I went outside and I was like burning up playing with the girls today. I was like, okay, I've got to go inside and get a short sleeve shirt on or something.
Yeah, we got to Wichita last night to exchange gifts with my wife's family, and I got outside and I was like, what the hell is this? Just immediately I was in like shorts and a short sleeve because we were coming from Texas. I was like, oh, this is not appropriate dress wear anymore. And so I'm doing good. Definitely dragging a little bit from all the driving, all the traveling. It's always tough when we're in Texas. We got family in Austin, and then we got you guys and other family in Belton, and we're in a different room every single night basically. And so it's good to be back home. But I do miss that Texas weather already.
It's definitely not that bad for sure. It gets pretty bad over the summertime, but it's not that bad compared to the frigid, freezing temperatures you get in the winter where you're at.
And we still get the blazing hot 105
True.
plus humid, crappy days here too. We get the worst of all worlds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but anyway, Jay, I also have to admit too, it's speaking on everybody following our kind of adjusted schedule for the holidays. Hand up, screwed this one up a little bit. We typically try to record. Obviously, you guys can tell that we try to record a couple episodes ahead of time, or we try to get the most up-to-date news whenever we can. But with this new schedule, we typically do not record these episodes. A little behind the scenes action here. We don't typically record these episodes on a Sunday. We're recording this one Sunday, going to release it Monday. And I was just sitting there watching Sonic 2 with the kiddos and made some pulled pork sandwiches from the crock pot and was tending to that and trying to get everybody ready for bed, and had my phone in the other room, wasn't even paying attention to it. Going to go start a movie with my girlfriend, and we were just going to kind of relax for the rest of the evening. And then I look at my phone for the first time in a few hours, and Jake is like, 7:30. Hey, man, just letting you know, I'm ready to record whenever you are. 9 o'clock. Just, sitting here, he had the little meme of the little kid from like the 1930s or whatever sent to me of like, yep, just waiting around. Just let me know whenever you're good to go. And it was like 9:30. He goes, dude, I'm just hey, just want to know.
Tanner needs to be held accountable in the comments, on Twitter, everywhere, that he needs to give Jacob just an ETA. That's all I'm asking for. I try to work my night accordingly. If we have to record later, that's fine. But I'd like to know, hey, I can start a game of college football. Hey, I can watch a show with my wife. Hey, I can do something instead of sitting there going, do I want to start this? And then he texts me in the second quarter of my game, and then I got to pause it or turn it off because I want to record at that point just to go ahead and knock him out. And this isn't the first time I haven't gotten an ETA, and there's always a reason. And so I think we need to hold, as a community, we need to hold Tanner accountable, and maybe a punishment needs to be created for when an ETA is not given.
Hey, I hand up on this one, and I will hold myself accountable on it. But I will say the schedule typically does have to revolve around me because I've got 3 girls that have to be at bedtimes, and they're all fighting it all different hours. And then it's bath time and it's dinner and it's all sorts of other things that I'm having to deal with and help the old wife or the girlfriend out with certain things. And so anyway, that one's on me. I'll be held accountable. But yes, if best comment for a punishment in case of these situations that do happen, I'll do anytime I don't give Jake an ETA on a delayed recording session that we don't have currently planned at a certain time. So, but anyway, Jake, and if you want to throw one out, Jake, what do you got on the top of your mind?
I need to do some deep thinking on this to come up with a good one, an appropriate punishment for it. Because keep in mind, I was the one who's been driving for 12 hours over the last couple days and driving everywhere, doing all this stuff. And I was the one who remembered.
Yeah, sitting in the passenger seat watching football on his phone
I drove the whole way. My wife is great at a lot of things. Driving is not one of them.
Hey, Jake, we have some injury news for everybody. Isaiah Bond getting the go-ahead in practice has looked apparently at pretty full speed, at least whenever he's competing against air, running routes in practice with Quinn. Hey, that is a step ahead of where he was a week and a half ago getting ready for Clemson. And so we'll take that. But Isaiah Bond, I would assume, Jake, limited snaps. I would assume kind of a snap count depending on how the game is going, especially if the game gets out of hand at a certain point in time in favor of Texas. I don't imagine him playing and very late into that game. And then also Wisner expected to be in. Looks like he's a full go. Jake Majors also expected to be in. Cam Williams, right tackle, doubtful.
Yeah, dealing with a sprain in the right knee. And honestly, with Texas's depth, if he's banged up and he can't go, close to or at 100%, you have the luxury of putting in Trevor Gooseby. And so I think you would err on the side of caution to begin with. From Pete Thamel tweeted out that he's basically a game time decision. The way he worded the tweet pretty much tells you he's more than likely out, especially when you consider this is a game where I think you feel pretty comfortable throwing Trevor Gooseby in, and it sounds like Williams would more than likely be healthy for their next game. And so this is where having that offensive line depth is so important. Texas was very fortunate to have no offensive line injuries until that Texas A&M game, really. And then the depth showed up huge in that game. It showed up against Georgia, even though that game wasn't a great game for the offensive line. Being able to put in Gooseby for her game at left tackle and it not just be an absolute nightmare. And then we saw, obviously, an offensive line shuffle against Clemson as well, and really no drop off. So shout out to Kyle Flood for recruiting the depth he's brought in, developing that depth into where you can bring in guys and there's not really much of a drop off, which kind of follows the fall reports that I was reading, which was the starting offensive line looks really good. The second string offensive line looks almost just as good. And that was as a full 5.
Yeah.
So that tells you how much depth they have going.
And Jake, underrated quality. Now, I know that it has been talked about, at least on this podcast. We have given the man his flowers. But if you had told me that from the A&M game going into the quarterfinal game against Arizona State at the beginning of the season, that one of your more vital pieces to your offensive line was going to be Trevor Gooseby, I'd just be questioning what the hell happened. And the fact that he's playing well is good, but I mean, he's been a key part because if he doesn't step up and play to the level that he's played against Texas A&M, against Georgia, against Clemson, whenever he had to step in for Cam Williams, and now going into this Arizona State game, this Texas offensive line could be having issues on the edge that they're not having because of his solid play.
He's playing so well that NFL scouts are getting to that point where they're taking note and starting to get ready to prepare to scout him heavily next season and start mocking him in drafts already. Don't forget, he's a freshman, redshirt freshman though. So if he plays well enough, he could be a one and done technically. And he's a 3-star guy as well that's developed into this. And
Insane.
so clearly not only the recruiting and the development part, but this is why we talked about not to freak out about this recruiting cycle and them not really going for any of the big offensive linemen other than Fasusi, who they didn't get. Was if they are giving a scholarship to a 3-star guy at offensive line with how their recruiting has been lately, it's more than likely a guy that they have scouted and that their scouting department has correctly identified as a guy that has very high upside to develop.
It's the traits that they see. They see these certain traits in certain guys and how they're moving and their arm length. And you forget that these guys in high school, they're not fully grown yet. They're not fully developed in terms of their body quite yet. And so if Kyle Flood sees something that he likes in terms of length or in terms of natural ability, he's going to go ahead and take that chance on a 3-star and trust his development as a coach to these players and getting them to where they need to be. Kyle Flood, speaking of, was asked in a press conference about potential head coaching vacancies, and he said, "I'm focused on Arizona State right now. I'm focused on the quarterfinals. I'm not going to get to that point yet." But Texas's coaching staff has been cohesive for about a 4-year span with Coach Sark. Eventually, it is inevitably going to happen where pieces are going to start being branched off, and a Tashard Choice, a Kyle Flood, I don't think PK is going anywhere just because I think he likes his role. I think he likes being the defensive coordinator. I think he knows where he's at. But there's going to be pieces from time to time that are going to start being poached from other programs. And so, but Kyle Flood not giving into the bait and just sticking with the plan. And, he's an offensive line guy. He's not going to try to put attention on himself by any means.
And we've seen some turnover at positional coaches from them getting poached to get a bigger position. And Stark has done a very good job of hiring. And so I think he's someone you can trust at this point to bring in the right guy. But Kyle Flood is a guy that I would be trying to drop a bag on to get to stay, just because he is probably the best offensive line coach in the country since, he's been at Alabama as well. And so he's a guy that you want to stay because he develops big humans. And that has been a big part of the turnaround at Texas. And so that'll be one of those offseason storylines that we'll be following very closely once the season ends, because I'm sure we're going to see a handful of Texas coaches get poached to go, get bigger opportunity, not necessarily bigger opportunity, but bigger positional opportunities, whether it be going from a position coach to a coordinator, as Brennan Marion did from the wide receiver coach position, or a chance, to be a head coach as well.
Yeah, completely agree. Jake, on Friday, we had some bowl games that involved some Texas rivals, and it was Oklahoma losing to Navy in the Armed Forces Bowl. Tech loses to Arkansas. That was a lose-lose and a win-win at the same time for Texas, no matter how that game went. And then Texas A&M losing in the final moments of the game, similar to OU, to USC and the backup team there with all the transfers. Essentially, the Trojans practice squad took it to Texas A&M. Now, there will be some SEC folks that are saying, hey, why aren't you going for the conference? It's a team effort, SEC. No, it's a loser's mentality. I could give a shit less if OU loses or if Texas A&M loses. In fact, I kind of wanted Arkansas to lose that game as well. I don't really care how the SEC fares in bowl season. It has no impact on Texas's success by any sort of the imagination. So anyway, Oklahoma, they had a chance to win it. They went for 2. I actually liked the call. I agreed going for it for 2. But Brett Venables, Jake, definitely on the hot seat, and their message boards there in Norman are awfully hot.
Yeah, the message boards are ugly, and I can remember some of those days for Texas. It's just nice to see OU going through this now, and I think they just thought they were invincible at hiring coaches, and they finally have messed up a hire. And not only that, but extended him after his second season. And now you can't even fire him this year. I think they would fire him if he was still on his original deal, but he'd be a $44 million buyout. It'd be the second biggest buyout in the history of college football behind Jimbo at A&M. And so you
That's
can't really do
insane.
that if you're OU. And now you've had one of the largest departures as far as just amount of players leaving into the portal. And yeah, you're bringing in a new offensive coordinator, a talented QB, but that doesn't mean you turn your system around. Their defensive coordinator just took the head coaching job at West Virginia. And so OU is in a type of trouble that we've never seen this program in our lifetimes, and really that they haven't been in maybe ever as a program, because they've been so consistent as a football program.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point, Jake. I'm not entirely sure, definitely not our lifetimes, but I'm not entirely sure if Oklahoma has ever reached these kind of depths of mediocrity hell that Texas was kind of mirroring there with the Charlie Strong, Tom Herman eras in Texas. A nice, about over 10-year stretch of just mediocrity. And that's
Worse
where
than mediocrity.
and that's where OU finds themselves right now. I mean, they finished below 500. They finished 6-7 on the season, and they finished with 2 of the last 3 seasons under Venables with 6 wins. I mean, it's not a great feeling in Norman, and I love the fact that they feel that way, because Texas has had to feel that way for a certain period of time as well. They kind of, the fact that they gave him an extension after a 10-win season by not even winning the Big 12 or representing them the Big 12 championship game, and losing to Oklahoma State. Losing to Oklahoma State in the last time you're going to play in the foreseeable future is wild to me. And the fact that they lost that game and then was like, you know what? Yeah, sure, we'll go ahead and extend him. He's got what it takes. Yeah, no, that's not proving to be true whatsoever.
They gave him an extension because he beat Texas, which is a very Aggie thing to do.
Yeah.
Quite frankly. And so I'm sure Elko would have gotten an extension if he beat Texas in that last game, regardless of how their season ended.
And I'm not sure financially Oklahoma can afford to eat that contract like Texas A&M did with Jimbo.
Not a 40. I mean, a 44. A&M's crazy for doing that. You shouldn't be able to eat a $75 million buyout. You should not be allowed. It should be barred by the college. That money should go to, improving the facilities, improving academic facilities, improving other stuff on campus, not buying out a head coach that you kept extending anytime he beat a ranked team. You should have to suffer for multiple years with that man as your head coach for doing that in the first place. And OU, why? And not only that, it's just a stupid financial decision. It's such a short-sighted decision when it just ride it out, let him see if he can turn it around, throw money at the portal, throw money at NIL. Don't throw a bunch of money at a coach buyout. And so, but with that said, I know that buyout shrinks significantly after next season. So I think next season it's pretty much he has to get to 8-9 wins. They do have a tough schedule again. It's the same schedule in a reverse side of where they play at. He's got to probably get to 8-9 wins to save his job. Otherwise, I don't see how he could keep it regardless of what the buyout is.
And speaking of Texas A&M, they lose to USC 35-31. They allowed USC to score 21 against them in the fourth quarter, lost that fourth quarter 21-7. And Jake, I just want to go through Texas A&M's schedule for you. Now, they had benched Connor Wegman when they only had one loss against an LSU team who it took Marcel Reed to come in and win that game. But as a starting quarterback, Marcel Reed is 1-3, or actually 1-4 now. And that one win came against New Mexico State. Has not won as a starting quarterback for that program, a conference game or a bowl game. Do you think now Connor Wegman, he's going to go play at Houston in the transfer portal? Marcel Reed may not be that guy that they thought what they wanted him to be. Obviously, he played in this USC game, didn't get it done. Mike Elko also a questionable decision to make that choice. I'm curious your thoughts on the whole dynamic with Elko kind of falling off a cliff there towards the end of the season, completely aggied themselves. It feels like it's a cultural thing because the talent, I believe, has always kind of been there to exceed an 8-9 win season. However, this pattern continually keeps happening.
And this year's the ultimate disaster. I mean, I know it's Elko year one, but first off, they were a talented team. Second off, I mean, you were sit with your best record you've had in a long time. You've had big wins over Missouri and LSU at home that were both in the top 10 when you beat them. And then you lose to South Carolina badly. You take care of New Mexico State. You lose at a very bad Auburn team. You lose to your arch nemesis when you still had a chance to go to the SEC title game and had it at home, and that shouldn't even been in at A&M, but was because they bitched and moaned about it enough to get it. They lose that and really got dominated in that game, much worse than the scoreboard shows.
Right.
And then you get USC, who's playing essentially their practice squad team. Their scouting team is out there, and you lose the bowl game. Bowl games don't mean as much and all that stuff, but that's about as bad of a regular bowl game loss as you can have, in my opinion. And
especially with your starting quarterback moving forward, and USC Reed, didn't have their starting quarterback. They lost Miller Moss.
And on Marcel Reed, I mean, I was pretty high on him going into that Texas game, but when you look at it, I mean, A&M seems to have an issue going back through Jimbo, really everything post Kevin Sumlin, especially, where they just give up on 5-star quarterbacks the second they struggle. I mean, Weigman looked good in 80 to 85% of the games he played as an Aggie, and then they struggled in the first half against LSU. He gets benched, and then that's that.
Yeah.
And I think that's just short. It's okay to bench a guy in a game and bring him back, like Sark did with Quinn, who's an established starter for Texas. He benched him for a couple of possessions against Georgia. He came back in and he played much better. And I'm just surprised A&M just gave up on Weigman so quickly, especially to not then give Marcel Reed the same treatment when he was struggling in so many of their games. And I know he wasn't the reason they lost that Auburn game, but he wasn't very good against South Carolina. New Mexico State is New Mexico State. And against Auburn, he was fine. Against Texas, I don't know why they didn't put Weigman in. At least try it.
He set no sort of threat offensively against Texas. He wasn't running the ball efficiently. Texas had his number in terms of being able to shut him down and take away his biggest strength, which is scrambling around and using his legs. And whenever you're getting chased down by guys like Trey Moore and causing fumbles in the backfield and ending the game in those types of manners, you're better off with a guy who can at least extend the play and then get the ball down the field to its receivers, because Marcel Reed did not prove he missed open guys in that Texas A&M game. I mean, open guys that could have extended drives and just flat out missed them, and it ended in punts.
Yeah, and clearly teams knew how to game plan for him down the stretch. Texas had a game plan of where to push him in the pocket. And obviously he's a redshirt freshman. I don't think he's a true freshman.
I don't think he's a true freshman.
He's a redshirt freshman. So he's got time to develop now. But here's my thing is, if you're going to develop him over the offseason, and if he doesn't come out like the world on fire, you're just going to give up on him and put in, I think they have a 5-star coming in who's a true freshman. Are you just going to give up on him and put in and then just do that cycle? That's a dangerous cycle to get in at the quarterback position. At some point, you got to let a quarterback take some lumps. And I was a guy that coming into the season was very high on Weigman, and I just think they gave up on him so quickly and then didn't ever give him another chance when Reed was the one who was struggling. And it's just very weird to me how they handled it.
And thank God for Steve Sarkisian and allowing Quinn to go through these lumps and not create a quarterback controversy when he very easily could had with putting in an Arch Manning for the remainder of the season and making that switch at some point this year, following the Georgia game, following the Vanderbilt game, or what have you. Instead, he let Quinn ride it out, and has even seen Quinn struggle since that point in time, and yet has continued to stay with Quinn. And I think Texas is in a great spot right now with their quarterbacks, and you are still able to keep it Arch Manning from transferring. You're still able to continue with Quinn as the undisputed leader and starter of that locker room. And it just proves, if you trust your players are going to respond a certain way. Now you've got Connor Weigman, who has transferred out, leaving a bad taste in his mouth. If his word is going to affect other recruits, who knows what that's going to have an impact on. But you've seen quarterbacks like a Kyler Murray transfer away from A&M. You've seen quarterbacks from A&M transfer and go elsewhere. Haynes King.
Another guy they gave up on. They were all high on, said he's going to be a Heisman, and then benched him as soon as he started struggling. And then he transferred, and now he's a really good quarterback at Georgia Tech. They just aren't willing to take lumps at that position. And if that's the case, you should be going into the portal and going after the biggest quarterback in the portal every year instead of just recruiting a guy and not really taking the time to develop. Because guess what? You don't get a Johnny Manziel every time. You don't get a Vince Young. You don't get the guy who comes in as an instant superstar. That is the outlier. That is not the standard.
It's a great way to put it, Jake. Let's go ahead and move quite along. We've already we got still a little bit left to go. ASU quarterback, speaking of mediocre quarterbacks, ASU quarterback Sam Leavitt is excited to play against Quinn Ewers because he is, quote, ready to prove why he is the better quarterback. Jake, your thoughts?
What an idiot. I say that with no respect at all, because you've heard the Texas players talk about Arizona State in their press conferences in a game that they are heavy favorites in, and it's been nothing but respect of, I think Scadabo's the best running back in the country based off the film I've watched. I've been very impressed by them on their film because they do X, Y, and Z well. And then as the underdog team, you can take that and just not create any headlines. Nope. Just go into the game, have stuff ready in your pocket, hope they overlook you a little. Instead, you have your idiot freshman quarterback go, I'm gonna go out there and just say I'm better than the quarterback that clearly the whole Texas team loves. Regardless of what the Texas fan base says, the team loves Quinn. They wear Quinn Ewers shirts. They are all on. Quinn is the leader of that team. He may not be as outspoken as some guys that are leaders, but he has grown into that some. But he is the clear leader, and to give ammunition. I don't think it's really giving ammunition to Quinn. Quinn doesn't care. He doesn't listen to this stuff. I don't think he cares. But it's the Jahdae Barons. It's the guys on the defensive side that love Quinn. It's the offensive line. It's the wide receivers. It's all the guys who have shown how much they love Quinn that they're going to be like, okay, we were giving you respect and we want to go out there and beat you. Now we want to go out there and destroy you and make you look like frauds on national television. And that's what's going to happen to them.
Yeah. Another thing too, Jake, is I do think Quinn takes some things pretty personally. We've seen him respond to criticisms with some of his best play, whether that be going into the Florida game or what have you, where there's a lot of questions about what is Quinn going to do or how can Quinn respond, or even from the SEC championship game going into the Clemson game. We see Quinn kind of respond, and I saw a fire under Quinn again in that Clemson game that I'm not sure I'd seen in a little while, and I think this is only going to kind of add to the burners a little bit, and I wouldn't be shocked if Quinn doesn't come out firing on all cylinders and Sark having a game plan that is kind of revolving around Quinn throwing the ball with RPOs and very pass heavy early on. And that's also happens to be ASU's weakness of their defense. So we'll get into that in tomorrow's episode. But I have a feeling that Quinn is going not to outwardly say he's got something to prove with those comments, but I think internally he's a competitor just like anybody else out there.
No, he definitely is. He showed it against A&M. Everyone's Quinn can't use his legs, and now he's got a bum ankle. You got to bench him because he can't use his legs. What's he do? He opens that. He was the one who jump-started the offense of that game by scrambling on a bum ankle when everyone's talking about he couldn't scramble. And then he made some big runs against Clemson.
And against Clemson, yep.
And when my thing about Quinn is when the game has been on the line, when they've needed to play, he's not afraid to sack up and make a play. Even against Arkansas, which was one of his worst games of the season, he was the one who kept it on the 4th and short to clinch the game and ran head. I mean, he two-ed it into a linebacker to get that first down. And he was fired up about it. And that was cool to see. He struggled that game, but when it came down to it, they needed a play to get a first down. He did it. And that's that competitive drive of Quinn. That's when it comes out, and that's when you see it. And yeah, I mean, with how I think Texas should attack this Arizona State defense early, I wouldn't be surprised if Quinn has a ridiculous stat line at halftime. And then it's okay, let's just have Quinn throw the ball 5 times in the second half at most.
All right, approach. Yeah, I completely agree. Let's go ahead and get into the quarterfinal games going on starting on Tuesday in the Fiesta Bowl, Penn State taking on Boise State. Penn State is 11.5-point favorites over the G5 Mountain West champions. Boise State clinching the bye week going into the playoffs. Over under set at 53.5. How do you feel that this game is going to go? What are your takes on it, and a final prediction?
This is this is one of those games where I like Boise State with the points just right off the bat. I think that's a lot of points. I think Boise State's going to come out prepared and fired up to play in this game, and they're going to come out ready. The question is if Penn State completely commits to shutting down JT, can they throw the ball well enough in this game to put up some points? Because I think Boise State should be able to have some type of success stopping Penn State, because I think Penn State's offense is good. It's better than it's been in previous years, but their defense isn't quite as good as it's been in previous years, but it's still not a great offense. And so I've toyed around with picking Boise State in this game, but I think I'm going to take the coward way out, and I'm going to pick Penn State to win, but I'm going to pick them to win by a touchdown. And I do think Boise State covers. I'm probably going to bet Boise State. One of the perks of being in Kansas City is I do get to legally bet on the games. And I do think I'll probably throw a little bit of change on Boise State to cover that spread.
Jake, it's the Fiesta Bowl. It's Boise State wearing their classic unis in the Fiesta Bowl with the color scheme. We talked about it earlier in the episodes this week. I really want to take Boise State. I really do. And I've said, even in the first round, I said, I think someone's going to have an upset. I think a lower seed and technically, point spread wise, who is favored. I think someone's going to win. It's either here or Notre Dame are my two options, in my opinion. Well, I mean, I guess who's favored in that? Ohio State. Ohio State's favored. Yeah. So I think there's going to be an upset of a larger point spread than 2.5 points is my point here. And if it's not going to be Notre Dame and Georgia, which I think this side of the bracket, I want to get your opinion after I state, my prediction. I want to get your take on this side of the bracket with Notre Dame, Georgia, Penn State, and Boise State. I just feel like something's got to give eventually. Penn State is a team who has historically kind of dropped the ball in big games, but they beat opponents who they're supposed to beat. This is an opponent they're supposed to beat, but it's also a big game. And I wasn't overly impressed with SMU and how Penn State played SMU, aside from the pick sixes and the turnovers that Jennings gave to their defense, put their offense in very favorable field position, and it was at home. If those things don't happen, I think that's a much closer game. I wasn't impressed by their offense by any means, by any stretch of the imagination. Boise State's defense is nothing to write home about. I don't think that it's a championship caliber defense by any means, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bite the bullet on this one. I'll take the lumps if I have to, but I'll also take the glory if it does happen. I'm taking Boise State. I'm thinking Ashton Jeanty is going to win this thing with 3 touchdowns. He's going to run all over this Penn State offense or this Penn State defense. And I'm not quite sure that Drew Aller, however you pronounce it, is capable of winning big games like this. But I do think you take the game out of the Boise State quarterback's hands and you give it to the Heisman runner-up.
Yeah, I mean, the key for Boise State winning this is obvious. You got to find a way to get Jeanty going, and Penn State's going to do everything they can to shut him down. Maybe that's by coming out and attacking them through the air. But for Boise State to win this game, Jeanty needs a big game, but that's not that far-fetched for that to happen. And so I don't hate your pick here. I mean, I was very close to picking Boise State, but I went somewhere else with my upset special.
Yeah, I think there's going to be an upset, and the only reason why I didn't is because I think that on the other side of this same bracket, that upset's not going to happen. And so I was like, well, these are my only options, and this is what I'm going to stick with. So, Jake, going into Wednesday on New Year's Day, the 4:00 game, we will predict the Texas-Arizona State game on tomorrow's episode leading up to the game on Tuesday. So stay tuned for that, obviously. But at the 4:00 game following the Texas Arizona State game, Texas will have already punched their ticket to the quarterfinals and will play the winner of Ohio State or Oregon. Ohio State 2.5-point favorites over the 1 seed overall Oregon team, undefeated this year. Oregon has already beaten Ohio State. That was in Eugene, Oregon, granted, but 55.5 over under. I'm actually going to take the points on the over with that game. I think it's going to be a high scoring game. Jake, I think Ohio State put on the best performance of the first round. I think they're the best team going into the quarterfinals in terms of how they played against Tennessee. They had the best opponent in Tennessee, and they completely stomped them out, smothered that fire, and is now going into going to take on Oregon. I think Oregon is kind of I would think that Dan Lanning has this Oregon team completely prepared and a little pissed off that everyone is picking Ohio State in this game. I'm going to take Oregon in this game, and I think Oregon's going to win this game. And I'm not saying by a lot. I think it's going to be a close game. I don't even know if I would take them to cover the spread. But I would have them outright, but I don't know if Ohio State, even if Ohio State wins this thing, that it's not going to be Oregon covering. And so I'm going to pick Oregon to win this game, Jake, and I think that it's going to be a very close game, very similar to what we saw in Eugene. I think it's going to be the same recipe for success. I don't think Oregon's offense is going to really be able to stop Ohio State very often, so I think a lot of points are going to be had for them to win.
Yeah, when I look at this game, I go, okay, it's probably going to be high scoring, just like the first time. So when I look at it's going to be high scoring, which quarterback do I like better? Well, I like Dylan Gabriel better than I do Will Howard. So I'm going to pick Oregon. I picked Oregon to win the national title at the start of the year. I didn't pick them when we did our bracket predictions. Probably should have just stuck with what I was going with, but at the start of the season. But yeah, I mean, I like Oregon in this game. I think Dan Lanning has all the ammunition he needs to get his team fired up for this game. I think it's the classic, like you see in the NFL. You watch Wild Card Weekend and you watch one team look really good and you go, they're going to go in and beat the 1 seed. Like they look so good. They're playing at a different level than they were in the regular season. The 1 seed kind of coasted at the end of the season, and they're going to go in and win that game, and then they go and lose.
Yep.
And I think that's what happens with Ohio State. We get the classic, just they look amazing in that first round game. Then they come out and you realize, oh, Oregon's probably a lot better than Tennessee was. It's not at Ohio State. And it's, if anything, it's going to be closer to a home game for Oregon with it being in the Rose Bowl. And so I do like Oregon in this game. I do think it'll be close. I think it'll be similar to the last game. I'll take Oregon 37-32, another very high scoring type game.
Yeah, I'll give a score, but yeah, it'll be somewhere around that range. I think it'll be, a 35-32, something along that line of thinking with Oregon beating Ohio State. So you and I both have Oregon winning that game in a close one, getting ready to take on Texas in the semifinals. So last game that we're going to predict of the quarterfinals, that'll be the night game on Wednesday, ending off the first day of the new year at 7:45. It'll be Notre Dame taking on Georgia. Georgia is a 1.5 favorite over Notre Dame with the backup quarterback, Gunnar Stotkin. 45.5 points. I'm actually going to take the under on this game. But Jake, what are your thoughts, and give your prediction first, and then I'll follow up with mine and we'll end the show.
If I was Notre Dame, I'd be watching that Georgia Tech game and going, okay, Riley Leonard might not be quite the runner that Haynes King is, but he's a capable runner. And I would be attacking their defense in that way. And then with the play action passing game, and I think Notre Dame has a path to success on the offensive side of the ball. I think defensively, I think this is where it's tough. Georgia was a Carson Beck led team. He was the system that ran the offense. Georgia is a little bit better off when they just run. And now with the backup quarterback in, they are going to run. And now they have the quarterback run threat as well. And I think that serves well for their offense. And that's my biggest hesitation in this game. But I'm going to pick Notre Dame to beat Georgia in this game. This is my upset special of the bracket. because I think most people think it'd be a bigger upset than a 1.5 point spread.
I
I've
agree.
seen a whole lot of on Twitter, put your mortgage on Georgia. I'm not putting my mortgage on Notre Dame, but I am picking them to win because I think their offense is going to be able to have some success, control the clock a little. And then I think Notre Dame is good enough on defense that they'll find a way to stop the run or at least slow it down, put them in some 3rd and long situations, and then send the heat. As we saw in that Texas-Georgia game, when they were sending some heat at Stockton, he threw a terrible pick that should have lost them the game.
Yeah, should have been a
late
pick
in that
six
game.
if Gilbo turns around and blocks or even chips the guy who ends up tackling Jahdae Bear, and Texas wins that on a walk-off pick six.
And so I like the under in this game as well. I'm going to go Notre Dame 20, Georgia 17.
Jake, I think I'm going to, I already kind of teased. I already had, one upset. I don't think it's going to happen more than once. I do think the upset is going to happen on this side of the bracket, whether it's Notre Dame beating Georgia or Boise State beating Penn State. I'm going to go with Georgia winning this game just for the simple fact of I think this is one of those program games. We saw a program game last week on the first round games with Ohio State and Tennessee. One program has been in these moments. They play big games. They show up for big games, and they win big games more times than not. Tennessee does not. Ohio State does. Notre Dame has played in these games, but they don't typically win them. We see Notre Dame fall short continually, time after time after time, when it comes to a New Year's Six game, whether it is a national championship game, whatever game it is, Notre Dame does not show up in the big game whenever they need to. And until proven otherwise, I just think Kirby Smart is going to find himself a way to outcoach. And he's got plenty of bulletin board material to get his team fired up to believe that they're the underdogs. When Georgia believes that they are the underdogs, they come out as the better team 10 times out of 10. We've seen it with Texas. Both times we've been favored to beat Georgia, and that both times they've come out and punched us in the mouth. I think the same thing's going to happen with or without the backup quarterback of Georgia, being a factor. I do like the matchup for Notre Dame in terms of the ability of the quarterback to run the ball and control the clock with their run game. We'll see if Georgia's a little bit better at the line of scrimmage than Indiana is.
Yeah, and that is the big risk here, right? If Georgia's defense comes out and plays like they have against Texas, it gets a lot harder for Notre Dame to win this game. But I think that formula of being able to run the quarterback some is something that has just consistently given Georgia's defense threats. Then that opens up the play action passing game, and their secondary is suspect. We saw it against Texas. Texas racked up all the yardage against them. They just couldn't convert them into touchdowns.
Yeah.
And I think Notre Dame will be able to run the ball effectively enough when they do get in that red zone area because of the threat to run Riley Leonard, that they'll be able to get enough points to win it. Notre Dame may end up, I'll put it this way. There's a better chance of Georgia blowing out Notre Dame than there is of Notre Dame blowing out Georgia. But I think there's a better chance of Notre Dame winning the close game. But that leaves a lot of room for me to look really stupid, and I'm fully prepared for that.
A better chance could still mean a 51% chance over a 49% chance. It's still a better chance. It just doesn't mean that there's
since I picked Notre Dame, I would say, I'd say there's like a 51% chance they win the game, and in 100% of those chances, it's a close win. There's a 49% chance of Georgia winning, and in 45% of those, it's a blowout.
Which that means it's an upset. That means it's an upset, and that's what we've discussed already. Well, Jake, that's going to do it for today's episode. I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as we did recording it for you. Again, thank you for staying with us throughout this kind of weird holiday season schedule that we've got going on, and then with all the bowl games as well. It just kind of fit better, I felt like. And so, again, these episodes are releasing at noon. We release them Saturday, Sunday, going into Wednesday, where we will have our immediate reaction following the Texas game. It'll come out around 3:34-ish o'clock probably. And so, and who knows, that recording might go really long. It might be an hour long, session. And so the episode drops a little bit later. However, we do appreciate it. That will be coming out on Wednesday following the Texas Longhorn game. stay with us this week. These episodes will drop at noon. This is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on All In Horns, your daily fix for your Texas Longhorns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. That's Jake Jimerson. I'm Tanner Carlson. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to all things and all updates for your Longhorn Nation. So we will see you tomorrow, where we will break down the Texas-Arizona State game. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, hook 'em.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.